Howdy folks, I want to give you a little walkthrough in this video of Git and GitHub. Just give you a few things to hang some things, hooks to hang your ideas on, so you might have a better idea of what we're talking about here with Git. So to give you the general overview and to kind of review where we've been so far, Git is a version control system, and it allows you to save basically snapshots of the files that you're working on. And this is really cool because you can not only track files that you add to a project, but you can track detailed changes that you're making to a project. So for example, here is a repo that I set up for the course website for my Web Design 3 class. And I've just made a few commits to this repo so far, and you can see that history here. So the very first thing I did was create a commit called initial file set. And so here in this commit, I called it initial file set. And you can see in the report down here that I added a series of files. So I added this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. So what I basically did was collect all those files, and I saved a snapshot and I said, here's my initial file set. Boom. And I committed those into my repository. Now, by the way, I'm using a visual tool here called SourceTree that I've used for many years and I like a lot. I'm also getting into using Git straight through the command line, but basically I got away with using a visual editor like this for a long time. Did never need to use the command line. I did a tutorial on the command line Git thing, like what I've given you early on so that I could get the concepts, but then I moved into a visual editor like this and it's been just fine. Now that I work in a professional development environment, I found that there's another developer or two who use an editor like this, but most of them use the terminal command line to run their commands, and so I found that it's going to be helpful for me to know more about that command line so that I can talk to them well. But anyway, for the purposes of our course, I want to be able to show you in visual form. Now we're also going to be using GitHub Desktop, which is going to work very similarly to this tool. But SourceTree shows the kind of branches and things like this a little bit better. So I'm just showing you how it works here so you can get that idea better. So you can look at this next commit and notice that the icons over here change a good bit. There's some of the same green pluses that represent that we added a file, activities.md, but look, I also removed a file. And so you can see just while that file no longer exists after this commit, I can look back at this commit and recover those contents if I wanted to. I also changed some files. So I changed this config.yaml file, and you can see that what it's actually doing is showing me the lines that I changed. It's showing me where I inserted content and removed content. Pretty sweet. So you can see there's a lot of power packed into these. So if I can just kind of thumb through these, you can kind of see the overall history of things that I've been doing here. And one of the most recent things I did is I fixed some of the spacing for list items and paragraphs so that the reading might be a little bit easier for you guys. I also updated my lesson 1 file, putting in notes where I was going to add videos and adding some new instructions. And that's all there that can be reviewed. What a nice tool. Well, so working locally in a repo like this is fantastic. Huge difference in order to kind of keep track of the changes that you're making on a project. But all the better, we can make use of remote repos through platforms like GitHub and Bitbucket, and we use another one called GitLab at Mile 2 where I work right now. And so when we have a commit that we want to send to that remote repo, we can do a push command. Okay. However, just pushing a straight series of commits works just fine when it's just you, but anytime you start adding other people into the mix, you can easily run into conflicts, or conflicts is the word that they use in GitHub. Where I might be editing one file and somebody else might be editing that same file, and if we both try to push those changes, the repo is going to get a little bit confused, and it's going to want us to resolve those conflicts. So that can work, but it does get messy. So Git has set up not anything other than the core technology Git itself has this ability to add branches. There's a whole bunch of different approaches to using branches, but the one we've been using at my workplace I have found particularly helpful is something called Git flow. And this is where you have one main master branch that represents the latest working, fully functional, production-ready release of something that you're working on. So you can see that the first one we did way back here was just to add this README file. We really didn't release anything for a long time. Way up here, eventually, you'll see there's another dot on that blue line. And here it is, because we merged one of the other branches in and we officially created a first release of this program. You can see I made another significant release here, version 1.1, 1.0.1 that is. But anyway, so the master branch is something that you keep as the one clean thing, and you only ever merge into it when you have a fully accepted, developed product. So what you do instead then is you branch off of main to have a develop line. So that's that pinkish line here. And the idea then is that everybody who's going to be working on the project is going to create another branch off of develop called a feature branch. And so that's what this green little blip here and this purple blip here and the kind of yellowish mustard blip here. This means that at some point, all of the different people working on this project branched off of the latest thing from the develop line. So a good example to look at is this one right here, where there was some work done first by this green branch. When that work was done, it was just one commit. Luke over here, he made the changes. He added some testing files and some other helpful things, and then he merged into develop. That meant that anybody else who wanted to could access those new things and create another branch off of there. So by the time, let's see, actually let's look at one that I did here. So by the time I came along and did work on this branch, several more changes had been made to develop. So I branched off from there and I added some additional, oh, actually that's Luke again. Oh, here's my purple one, here we go. I pulled off of here and added some files, changed some things, did some work. Okay, and eventually then we actually merged this in. It doesn't quite reflect that as well here, but we really did merge this back into develop. So that means that I created this separate branch and I did my own little work. Meanwhile, somebody might have come along, in fact, Luke did right here. Luke came along and he merged in this test coverage thing. So a little bit later then I said, oh, I want those latest things. So I pulled those changes over into my timeline and resolved any of the conflicts so that therefore when I was done and ready to merge mine in, I first kind of pulled over from everybody else's, dealt with any of the conflicts, and now I'm ready to merge it back into develop so that we're sure that the stuff that I've done has accounted for any of the changes that have happened from other people's lines. So you can see it looks complex, but trust me, it's a whole lot simpler when we use these branches to kind of keep things straight and to keep our code base clean. So you can see it's gotten a little bit crazy on this CVDI app. We've had a team of about 6 different people working on this and working on all kinds of features all at the same time. And boy, there's a whole little dance to making that work well. So let me talk to you just a little bit about what the merge process looks like. But to demonstrate, let me just create some changes in our project. So I'm just about to upload a video. Maybe I also want to add a little bit more about SAS. But just to experiment, I'm going to just come down here and add a couple of crazy lines. Crazy lines. Woohoo! Okay, so I made a change to my Web Design 3 site. If I was working on a team, I would not commit them straight onto the main line here. I would create a branch. So let's say that this is the Lesson 1 Modifications branch. Okay, so this is just a silly demo. There's no big deal on anything fancy here. In fact, it's a good time perhaps to also switch over and show you GitHub Desktop. So I'm just going to commit those changes really quickly here. New file changes. Okay. All right, I'm going to close out of there. Oops, actually, nope. I want to push those up. And I want to do my Lesson 1 Modifications branch. It's going to go up. But don't worry about this. We're going to look at this in GitHub Desktop next. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to GitHub Desktop so that you are there. That's the tool I've prompted you to download. So first of all, I want to go and actually get my Web3 repo locally. So actually need to go to GitHub. Actually, let me see if I can do this another way. File, add local repository. There we go. I'm going to go to my folder where I already have this installed. All right, so Web3 is already here. In fact, lesson 1 of modifications is the branch I was already on, and I can click on history to see the history of stuff that's happened. So there's the new file changes that I just made. And you can see it looks a little bit different from source tree that we were looking at just a minute ago, but the same idea. New lines. Back over here you can see the same idea of the new lines and the removed lines on any of the 2 files. It kind of dives in from left to right here. But if I make some new changes, let's say I want to do another crazy line. Woohoo! And there's a typo. Actually, let me leave that typo in because that's something I can show you on the merge process. Okay, so I've got some changed files. I'm going to make a new commit, new changes. Woohoo! All right, so I've committed them, but notice I haven't actually pushed it. I get this little thing up here that says I'm 1 behind. So if I want to synchronize, I need to push to origin. Good. Well, I want to make sure I'm on the right branch first because I want this to push to the lesson 1 modifications branch. And now it's going to push, and up it goes. Nice. So if I go over here to GitHub and I go to my Web3 repo, I can go to the lesson 1 modifications branch. Oops, wrong place. And I can see the commits. And let's go to the lesson 1 modifications branch. And booyah, there are my 2 handy commits. Okay, so I've decided that I'm ready to now merge that branch into my main branch. So what I want to do in here is, look, it's actually flagged to me. Oh, look, you pushed some branches. Do you actually want to create a pull request? Well, I do. I could click new pull request, or I could use this little handy little feature that GitHub has given me. So I click on this, and what's happening is I'm going to name this sort of case. I'm kind of opening a case and I'm signaling to everybody else in the project that I want to merge in my lesson 1 modifications branch into master. So if I'm actually merging into master, that's a pretty big deal. Everybody else on the project is probably going to care about what I'm about to bring in. So I might give some info. I added some new stuff. Woohoo! So what this might actually be is I've finished a particular feature of a website that I'm working on. And I want to merge that new feature. Maybe I built a modification to like the nav bar or something like that. So it might be helpful for me to clarify which new feature I'm adding here so that people know kind of what they should be looking for. Usually I would have named the branch something relevant along those lines. But anyway, now you can also see if I scroll down that it's showing me the differences in the files. So it might be, if you do this the first time, it might be in this unified view where you just see the changes. But you can also switch to split view, which I like because I can see on the left the file before the changes and on the right the file after the changes. And I kind of like being able to see it that way. So I can just look at them myself, see that there's nothing really fancy going on, and now I'm going to create my pull request. So what's happening now is that everybody else who's on this project is going to get notified that I've created a pull request. And so they can come over to pull requests and click on my pull request, and they can see the initial message that I made. And you can see that GitHub has checked this out and said, hey, there's no conflict, so everything's green. But nonetheless, people can come in and look at the files. So they can go to the commits history and they can see what has been done. They can go to the files changed. They can actually look at things. They could even pull down my branch, merge it into what they're doing, and look at what they wanted to do. Okay, so if they've got some issue, so for example, I might come over here and I might be, look, dude, you have a typo on line 107. Come on. I can go back over to the conversation area and I can say, dude, you have a typo on line 107. Fix it. Okay, so this becomes a a part of the conversation that's happening. You can see it went up here. So I'm like, oh man, dang it. My alter ego realized the typo before I did. Dude, I better fix that. So I can go over and I can be like, oh yeah, I'm going to fix that, man. And then I can go to GitHub desktop and I can see that change. I've got it. Okay, fixed typo. Are we good now? All right, so I did that. I'm going to push it up into my branch. Okay, now look at this. GitHub has automatically refreshed and it says, hey, after the dude said, dude, you forgot you need to fix a typo, I pushed a new commit. And now the person could go over there and be like, oh yeah, oh, okay, actually, that should be updated. There we go. There's the fix. Okay, good. So now the guy who was like giving me a hard time might be like, okay, we're good now. And, do a little thumbs up emoticon or something like that. Nice. Okay, so basically I've pulled my code, I pushed my code up there, I've made it kind of a candidate for everybody to look at and kind of evaluate. So basically I'm showing you all of this because I want you to have a sense of what happens in a production environment, and because I think that this is going to be a really helpful tool for us to use when it comes to your code base for me to evaluate the stuff you're working on. So I'll try to go into more detail on this by the time the Project 1 instructions are kind of finalized. But when you're doing work on a project, I want you to create a develop branch, and I want you to do your work on that develop branch. I don't want to worry too much about a feature branch off of that. But before you then kind of call something done, I want you to push your changes up on that develop branch, and I want you to create a pull request that's going to signal to me you're ready for me to get in and look at that code and figure out whether it's ready for it to actually be merged into main. So I'm going to look at it. I'm going to provide some comments, which might signal that you need to make some more changes. You can then commit more changes and push them up just like I did here. But at the end of the day, I might approve it. And then there's also a way to require approval, which I'll look into and make sure to articulate for you. But when we're done, then we can say merge pull request and confirm merge. And now this has kind of been finished, and we can say delete this branch, and all of those changes are now going into the website. I've got some technology running on this called Travis that's actually going to deploy this thing to our actual web server for us, and before long you'd actually be able to see those few little silly changes in the actual website. So I'll clean those up another time, but now you've had an overview of how the whole GitHub thing can work in terms of some Git flow with the branches, how to push things up to the server, and how to do a pull request.